PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. And on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub, we're going to be continuing our series of doing player profiles. And we're going to be breaking down and talking about a player on the bottom six for your Vegas Golden Knights, someone who has been a member of the Vegas Golden Knights since 2017, and someone who has been earning through the ranks, someone who came in through the minor leagues, got his shot in the NHL, and has been a Stanley Cup champion with your Vegas Golden Knights. And this is going to be a really good episode. There's a lot of good content and stuff that we're going to be talking about on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub, as we're going to be doing a player profile on number 55, Keegan Kolesar. And this is going to be a really fun kind of breakdown to talk about one of the younger guys on the organization. And before we get into that, go to PRConnectionsRadio.com, voice of new media. Check out all the amazing content we have on the network, including Vegas Hockey Hub. Go to the social media pages. They're on all social media platforms, on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, almost on every single most social media platform, Twitch as well, at PR Connections. And if you want to follow us on social media, we are also on all major platforms at Vegas Hockey Hub. And if you want to follow me, I'm right down there at Ian J. Kelly. And really starting this out and getting into it, this is a guy in Keegan Kolesar that, has a really interesting background. And if you actually know some things about Keegan Kolesar, it's really interesting how he earned his opportunity and the way that he kind of earned his position into getting into the NHL. As with Keegan Kolesar, this is somebody who was, he was born out there in Canada and eventually earned his way going into the Western Hockey League. As the guy who was born from Brandon, Manitoba in Canada, Keegan Kolesar, he eventually would go to the Western Hockey League and play for the Seattle Thunderbirds. And with, Keegan Kolesar, this is somebody who has been a really good member of the Vegas Golden Knights organization. But something that a lot of people don't remember, or maybe some people do not know, is how he got started. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about on this episode of Vegas Hockey Hub. So when it comes to Keegan Kolesar, getting out there, starting in the Western Hockey League, he would spend not one, not two, not three, not four, but he would spend parts of 5 seasons playing for the Seattle Thunderbirds. And what a interesting journey that was. In 2012, 2013, he would join the Seattle Thunderbirds as they would play in the Western Hockey League playoffs that season. Now, they would be eliminated in the first round of the 2013 playoffs in the Western Hockey League. He would actually not register a single point, but that was one of his first action in 2012, 2013. Now, in 2013-2014, for Keegan Kolesar, his first full-time season playing in the Western Hockey League, he would register 2 goals and 8 points, but more importantly, he would have 45 penalty minutes in 60 games that season, as he would help the Seattle Thunderbird as they would make the playoffs in 2014 for the Western Hockey League playoffs. And the Seattle Thunderbirds, they would beat Everett in the first round and then would move on to the second round before being eliminated and swept in the Western Hockey League playoffs in 2014. Now, in 9 games in 2014, he would only have 2 points in 9 playoff games that year. But, it's a lesson. It's all about, improving, getting better. So 2014, 2015 with the Seattle Thunderbirds, once again, all of my stats come from either westernhockeyleague.com, CHL, Hockey Reference, Elite Prospects, everything going on there. In 2014, 2015, his second full-time season playing in the Western Hockey League, Keegan Kolesar in 64 games that season. Listen to this stat sheet here. 19 goals, 19 assists, and 85 penalty minutes in 64 games. I mean, just wow. what a stat line that was in 2014 and in 2015. The fact that in the single season, he racked up 85 penalty minutes in 64 games for Seattle. This is someone who is really showing his value and what he could do with the Seattle Thunderbirds. And Keegan Kolesar, at this point, what's interesting about it is who is on this roster in Seattle at that point. So when he is playing in the Western Hockey League, there is a lot of talent that is on that roster, but one player who he eventually would become teammates with in the NHL would be Shea Theodore, as Shea Theodore would spend actually 3 seasons suiting up alongside Keegan Kolesar in the Western Hockey League out there in Seattle. We've talked about Shea Theodore on this show before, but some other players who actually did play in Seattle along the same time as a guy like Keegan Kolesar. For example, you have currently Washington Capitals defenseman Ethan Bear. He was in Seattle at the same time as Keegan Kolesar. And you also had a guy who did play, who is a really good player in the New York Islanders system right now, in Matt Barzal. So much talent was on the Seattle roster alongside Keegan Kolesar during his time playing in Seattle. Now, he would have 2 more seasons after 2014-2015, and he would just keep getting better and better and better with the Seattle Thunderbirds. As in 2015-2016, he would suit up and play in all 64 games for Seattle. He would register 30 goals on the season, rack up 61 points, almost averaging a point per game, and get this, Keegan Kolesar would have 107 penalty minutes in 64 games. The say that Keegan Kolesar was having a really jam-packed, a really outstanding tenure in the Western Hockey League. This is somebody who had 30 goals and 107 penalty minutes in 2015 and in 2016. And then in the Calder Cup playoffs that season, the Seattle Thunderbirds, they would actually go pretty far in the 2016 Western Hockey League playoffs, as the Seattle Thunderbirds would go all the way to the Western Hockey League Championship, where they would lose to the Brandon Wheat Kings. Ironically enough, by the way, if you actually go back to some of the videos we've done in the past, that 2015-2016 Brandon Wheat Kings just so happened to be general manager and head coached by Kelly McCrimmon, the current general manager of the Vegas Golden Knights. And in that 2016 Western Hockey League playoffs, he would have 7 goals and 15 points in 16 games in the Western Hockey League. So Keegan Kolesar in one season racked up 37 goals and had 76 points with the Seattle Thunderbirds when you combine his playoff stats and his regular season stats. But that's not all, folks. As in 2016-2017, his final season playing in the Western Hockey League, his final season in juniors, he would go out with a bang. As Keegan Kolesar in 54 games that season for Seattle would have 26 goals, 60 points, and for the second season in a row would rack up over 100 penalty minutes for Seattle. But the good news for Keegan Kolesar is that in 2017, in the Western Hockey League playoffs, the Seattle Thunderbirds would go all the way and win the WHL championship. And what a moment that was for the Seattle Thunderbirds, as this was an organization that wins the Western Hockey League championship. But anybody who does know anything about Canadian Hockey League championship play, if you win the Western Hockey League, the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, or the Ontario Hockey League, then you advance to the Memorial Cup. And in 2017, the Seattle Thunderbirds would advance to the Memorial Cup and would finish 4th out of the 4 teams in the Memorial Cup that year. Now, something I do have to mention about the Seattle Thunderbirds that year is not only did you have LA Kings defenseman Austin Strand, not only did you have Alex True, who's with the Seattle Kraken, and Matt Barzal and Ethan Bear, who I mentioned before, but you also had somebody like Keegan Kolesar on that same team out there in Seattle. So what an insane turn of events for Keegan Kolesar is that he ends his junior career. He finishes his junior hockey career by taking the Seattle Thunderbirds and helping them get to the Western Hockey League Championship. They win the WHL Championship, and they move on to the Memorial Cup in 2017. Now, just to put this into perspective for everyone watching all around the world, this was his final stat line in the Western Hockey League before moving over to the NHL. Keegan Kolesar with the Seattle Thunderbirds, 5 seasons of being with them, 77 goals, 167 points, and a whopping 338 penalty minutes in 243 games. What an outstanding resume for Keegan Kolesar. I mean, if you really just study this and look at it from a 50,000 foot point of view, it doesn't look like much. But when you study it and you examine it and you look at EliteProspects.com and you see what he did in Seattle, those last 2 seasons that Keegan Kolesar was in Seattle, the Seattle Thunderbirds lost in the Western Hockey League Championship in 2016. And then in 2017, they go on to win the WHL Championship. So a very successful ending to his Western Hockey League career in Keegan Kolesar. Now, he would enter the NHL draft, and Keegan Kolesar would be drafted by the Columbus Blue Jackets. But wait, Columbus Blue Jackets, I thought he was with the Vegas Golden Knights. Hold on, we'll get to that in a second. Keegan Kolesar being drafted 69th overall, nice. This would be a situation where Keegan Kolesar would be drafted in the 3rd round. And interesting enough, by the way, Anthony Cirelli, who is a multi-time Stanley Cup champion with the Tampa Bay Lightning, he would be drafted a few picks later. And for all the Vegas Golden Knights fans who are watching, in the same round of the 2015 NHL draft, Adin Hill would be selected 6 picks after Keegan Kolesar. So a very interesting turn of events where you have multiple Stanley Cup champions who are drafted in the same round as Keegan Kolesar. So Keegan Kolesar being drafted 69th overall by the Columbus Blue Jackets, but he would never play and he would never suit up for the Columbus Blue Jackets, as the Keegan Kolesar would be in juniors playing for Seattle outside of a few development camps, outside of maybe some training camp sessions. Keegan Kolesar would never officially suit up in Columbus. As a matter of fact, 2 years after being selected by Columbus, he would be on the move as on June 24th, 2017, the Columbus Blue Jackets would trade Keegan Kolesar to the Vegas Golden Knights for a future 2nd-round pick. Now, that future 2nd-round pick, I'm going to let you know who that was. It was Alexander Texier, who has actually become a solid middle 6 forward with the Columbus Blue Jackets to this day. But interesting enough, it took 2 seasons later after being selected for the Columbus Blue Jackets to swap out Keegan Kolesar and get a 2nd-round pick back. Now, keep this in mind. He was a 3rd-round pick 2 years prior, and they traded him for a 2nd. Very good value, by the way, to go from being a 3rd-round selection to being traded for a 2nd-rounder 2 years later. Now, Keegan Kolesar, after finishing his tenure in Seattle, he would join the Golden Knights organization, and they would immediately send him to the ECHL. He played for the Quad City Mallards, who would be the affiliate of the Vegas Golden Knights in 2017, in 2018. This is before they went over to the Fort Wayne Comets. This is before they eventually became the Savannah Ghost Pirates we all know today. And Keegan Kolesar would actually have a solid first season playing in the ECHL, as he would have 9 goals and 16 points with Quad City in 2017-2018. And to kind of put a little bit of a cherry on top of the 2017-2018 season, while Keegan Kolesar is playing in Quad City, he actually would have a teammate who would go on to eventually do something really cool. As with that 2017-2018 roster, he would eventually have a player who would go on and do something with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. And really cool there. Really excellent observation there. Now, after the Quad City Mallards, after that 2017-2018 season, he would then be promoted to the AHL. And playing with the AHL, he would join the Chicago Wolves. And man, oh man, we talked about this before on the channel, but that 2017-2018 Chicago Wolves team, that was a fascinating team to watch. As not only did you have guys like Keegan Kolesar be on that roster, but you still have players from the Golden Knights organization that are still active today, like Jake Bischoff, like Shea Theodore, like Ivan Barbashev. Oh yeah, trust me, we've talked about that before. Ivan Barbashev played with the Chicago Wolves in 2017-2018 alongside Shea Theodore, alongside Keegan Kolesar, and alongside Alex Tuch. So that 2017-2018 Chicago Wolves team was an impactful bunch, to say the least. And Keegan Kolesar would make an immediate statement in Chicago, as in 47 games that season, Keegan Kolesar would have 6 goals, 14 points, and would rack up 46 penalty minutes with the Chicago Wolves. So he almost averaged a penalty minute per game in the AHL during his rookie campaign. More importantly, for the Chicago Wolves, they would actually move on to the Calder Cup playoffs in 2018 with Keegan Kolesar on the roster. And in 2018, the Chicago Wolves would lose in the first round to the Rockford Ice Hogs, who are the affiliates of the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, 2019 would be a breakout season for Keegan Kolesar, as in 2018, he would not only be one of their top forwards, not only would he play in all 74 games for Chicago Wolves that season, but he would register 20 goals and 16 assists, plus a whopping 90 penalty minutes in 74 games. Once again, all of my stats come from eliteprospects.com. That's what I use for my reference point. Now, just think about that for a minute. In your second season playing professional hockey, you register 20 goals for the first time. You rack up near 100 penalty minutes in the AHL. Now, what would be the cherry on top with that? What would be the one kind of extra little oomph that you would have in the 2019 Calder Cup playoffs with the Chicago Wolves? How would you be able to play moving forward? Well, not only would Keegan Kolesar enter the 2019 Calder Cup playoffs with the Chicago Wolves, but he would help the Chicago Wolves go all the way to the Calder Cup finals. And interesting enough, by the way, anyone who goes back to my Nick Waugh player profile that we did a while back, in the 2019 Calder Cup playoffs, the Charlotte Checkers would win the Calder Cup playoffs with Nick Waugh on the roster. And who did Nick Waugh beat in the 2019 Calder Cup playoffs? Oh, his former line mate in Keegan Kolesar. Yeah, funny how this all connects, by the way. So Nick Waugh and Keegan Kolesar, before becoming line mates in Vegas, Nick Waugh would beat Keegan Kolesar in the Calder Cup finals. So kind of interesting how that works. Now, in the 2019 season, I have to mention this, by the way, because it is mind-blowing to your host, Ian Kelly. In that 2018-2019 season, not only would Keegan Kolesar accumulate 26 goals in 95 games, not only would he rack up 47 points in 95 games, but look at that number right there. 138 penalty minutes in 95 games. Like, when you really sit here and analyze that from a 50,000-foot point of view, Keegan Kolesar essentially averaged well over a penalty minute per game in the AHL. And considering what we saw from him in the Western Hockey League, where he racked up over 300 penalty minutes in the Western Hockey League, he already had 138 penalty minutes in a single AHL season. Now, moving forward with Keegan Kolesar, who we're doing our player profile on here on Vegas Hockey Hub, he would spend the 2019-2020 season playing in Chicago. Now, despite that 2019-2020 season, he would play only 33 games and have 18 points that season in Chicago. But something amazing and something huge would happen with Keegan Kolesar in 2019 and in 2020. As during the 2019-2020 season, Keegan Kolesar would get the phone call that he would never forget, as the Vegas Golden Knights on January 10th would call up Keegan Kolesar from the AHL. And the next day, on January 11th, 2020, he would make his NHL debut with your Vegas Golden Knights. And an ironic twist, by the way, he would play against the Columbus Blue Jackets, the team that just so happened to draft him 5 years earlier. Always amazing how the NHL has so many connecting plot lines and twists and all that. But yeah, he would play against his former team that drafted him in Columbus. Now, the end of the 2019-2020 season, he would actually be on the roster because of the COVID situation. The NHL would be in the bubble, and Keegan Kolesar would be on what they call a taxi squad. So the taxi squad was someone who could go up and down between the Vegas Golden Knights and the AHL, which was the Chicago Wolves at the time. So after having the NHL bubble where he was not played but was on the taxi squad, he would enter the 2020-2021 season being a full-time member of the Vegas Golden Knights. And in that 2020-2021 season, he would actually have 13 points in just 44 games. So he did not play all 56 games. He only played 44 of them. But more importantly, with Keegan Kolesar, he was building up momentum as a bottom six forward. He was really getting his feet wet and cementing himself as a fourth line winger with the Vegas Golden Knights. Interesting enough for Keegan Kolesar, in 2021, during the Stanley Cup playoffs, he would get his first taste of Stanley Cup playoff action as he would suit up in 17 playoff games for your Vegas Golden Knights, only registering 4 points in 17 games. So at this point in time, you're Keegan Kolesar. You had a fantastic junior career playing in Seattle. You go on and you have a really stellar AHL career. So now it's time to step up. It's time for you to earn yourself in the NHL as an everyday member. Can you do it? Can you be an everyday guy in the NHL if you're Keegan Kolesar? Well, it just so happens to be in that offseason, a roster spot would open up on the bottom six. Because Ryan Reeves would end up departing from the Vegas Golden Knights, he would move on in the offseason. He would go to New York Rangers. So in 2021-2022, Keegan Kolesar would play in all but 5 games that season with your Vegas Golden Knights. And in his first full-time year playing for your Vegas Golden Knights, in 77 games, he would have 7 goals with your Vegas Golden Knights. And you could see that the confidence was building with Keegan Kolesar. Anybody who was watching the Golden Knights in 2021, 2022, you saw that Nick Waugh, William Carrier, and Keegan Kolesar was becoming your staple on the fourth line. That you really didn't have to have a question mark on who your fourth line was. You had it with Kolesar, Waugh, and Carrier. And interesting enough, over the past 3 seasons, Kolesar, Waugh, and Carrier have been your staple. They have been your rock when they have been on the ice together over the last 3 seasons. So after having his best season with the Vegas Golden Knights up to that point, like I said, 24 points in 77 games in 2021-2022. I also have to mention, by the way, 68 penalty minutes in that season. So 68 penalty minutes in 77 games. He would actually end up having a very impactful 2022-2023 because not only would this be a season that would be very very impactful for Keegan Kolesar, but this also was what we like to call the contract time. Right? This is about making money. And we really don't talk about contracts that much on player profiles, but with Keegan Kolesar, I do have to briefly mention this because it is a very important detail. Now, Keegan Kolesar, he would end up getting a very interesting situation as he would be on a contract year in 2021, 2022, and after having those 24 points in 77 games, he would sign a 3-year deal worth $4.2 million. That's a base salary of $1.4 million, and he would stay with your Vegas Golden Knights. Now, this was the second contract he signed with the Vegas Golden Knights. His first deal was his $700,000 contract per year they signed with the Vegas Golden Knights when it first got started. So to go from $700,000 to $1.4 million, they essentially doubled his salary with the Vegas Golden Knights after a 24-point season. So after getting a brand new contract, after having all of the momentum from 2021, 2022, how would 2022, 2023 play out for Keegan Kolesar? Well, it would be fantastic for Keegan Kolesar, as not only in that season would he play in 74 games, but he would have his most goals in the NHL during his career, as he would have 8 goals and 18 points in 74 games. But he would have 68 penalty minutes on top of that situation. But that's not all. In the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs for your Vegas Golden Knights, Keegan Kolesar would be in the roster, he would be in the starting lineup, and he would help your Vegas Golden Knights go all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals and win the Stanley Cup in 2023. Keegan Kolesar would rack up over 50 penalty minutes in 22 playoff games with your Vegas Golden Knights. In fact, a very memorable moment is Keegan Kolesar defending his teammates against the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup Finals. Keegan Kolesar, throughout his entire career, has been known as somebody who's willing to drop the gloves and defend his teammates at a moment's notice. And that's what he did in 2022, 2023, and the Stanley Cup playoffs. Now, we have about a few minutes left here in the show. So, getting into 2023, 2024, the most recent season that we're doing right now, the Vegas Golden Knights would have Keegan Kolesar be in the lineup despite a struggle to the year, by the way. Some people may not remember this, but the first 2 months of the year, he really didn't rack up that many points. That caused some cause for concern. So, with Keegan Kolesar, they keep him in the starting lineup. He was still on an everyday contract with the Vegas Golden Knights. And with him, this would end up being a situation where he would play 72 games, rack up 6 goals and 15 points on the fourth line with the Vegas Golden Knights. I appreciate that. By the way, watch Stay Tuned Live. That is on Tuesdays, every single Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central. So for everybody who's watching on PR Connections Radio, go to Stay Tuned Live. They are on all social media platforms. They are everywhere right now. Go to Stay Tuned Live on Tuesdays. That's a fantastic show. But getting into the Keegan Kolesar situation this season, he kind of showed the confidence that the Vegas Golden Knights had in him. And with Keegan Kolesar having 1 year left on his contract heading into next offseason, he'll be interested to see how he does as a unit with the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, with 1 minute left in the show, I want to give you the stats of Keegan Kolesar side by side. So, Keegan Kolesar's stats in the American Hockey League with the Chicago Wolves, he had 28 goals, 67 points, and 157 penalty minutes in 151 games. Now, on the NHL side, Keegan Kolesar at this point in time, 24 goals, 70 points, over 200 penalty minutes in 268 games. So what a fantastic career Keegan Kolesar has had. He was in the Western Hockey League, helped them get some Memorial Cup in Seattle. Chicago, helps them get to the Calder Cup finals. And then with your Vegas Golden Knights, helps them win a Stanley Cup championship. So he has been well decorated, he has been well accomplished, and he has done a very successful job in his career. So until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. This was your player profile on Keegan Kolesar. And until next time, continue watching hockey, go support junior hockey, and go Knights, go!